I call it living from the end. This is one of the harder ones for people to get, but I'd like you to go again to the New Testament. Look at Romans 4:17. In the presence of him whom he believed God, who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did. And calls those things which do not exist as though they did. Those are very important, significant words. You have to be able to call the things which you have not seen yet materialize and manifest into your physical world. You have to be able to say to yourself, I call those things that I would like to become as if they already do. And you place into your imagination fearlessly the I ams which you would like to create for yourself. And when it's time for me to write another book, I don't even know what it's going to be. I just know that it starts germinating inside me. And it's like a calling, it's like a passion. It's as if I call those things, the book does not exist. I call it as if it did. I have a wonderful quote by the man I've cited before. His name is Neville, and it goes like this. He says, disregard appearances, conditions. In fact, disregard all evidence of your senses. That is what your eyes and ears tell you, that deny the fulfillment of your desire, whatever it is you want to attract into your life. Disregard appearances, conditions, in fact, all evidence of your senses that deny the fulfillment of your desire. Rest in the assumption that you already are what you want to be. For in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being, your extraordinary self, which is what this program is about, are merged in creative unity, and with your infinite being, God, all things are possible. God never fails, and you are a piece of that which never fails. And you are going to move beyond just being a piece and just being a fragment and just being a segment until it becomes your overwhelming knowing that you have within you this divine capacity. You don't need evidence of your senses. I wrote a book a few years back. The title of it, I had to get my publisher because they didn't understand it. They called back, they said, I think you got this wrong. I said, no, it's called You'll See It When You Believe It. Not the other way around. People will say, well, I'll believe it when I see it. It doesn't work that way. You'll see it when inside you have a knowing. And Neville also said, therefore, to incarnate a new and a greater value of yourself, you must assume that you already are what you want to be, and then live by faith in this assumption. Now, this flies in the face of so much of what you've been told, because you have a tendency to believe that what your eyes and ears tell you is reality. But this is what we know by our senses. Just this little tiny fragment. I can't even get, it's like a millionth of a millimeter. And all that is unknown is in the invisible, in the imagination. And most of our attention is focused on, this is my beliefs and my disbeliefs about what is possible and what isn't possible are here. And it's an endless universe. So placing I ams into your imagination is one thing. It's an intellectual act. Living from the end means that you call the things which do not exist as if they did.
Quantum moments show up in different ways for virtually everyone. But what they usually signify, especially what I just described, that very vivid, surprising, kindly, benevolent, long-lasting kind of thing that takes place, is where a person is getting themselves, in the Tao they would call it, returning back to the Tao, returning to the place from which you came while you're here, living heaven on earth within yourself, In fact, Leo Tolstoy wrote a book called The Kingdom of Heaven is Within. about that, just that concept, about having it within you. And I don't know if it's so much a letting go as it is a reconnection to what I call the field of intention, or the power of intention. I mean, intention, the book, The Power of Intention, is really not about the ego saying, I intend to make something happen, and that's therefore I'm going to do it. It has nothing to do with that. It's the opposite of that. The field of intention is really a field from which all things are intended. And all you have to do is reconnect yourself to that field, that creative field that intends everything into the world of the 10,000 things, into the world of the material world, and get yourself in harmony with that. And that's what I think happens in the meaning phase of our life, is that we reconnect to our source of being. Castaneda spoke about that there's a link between you and this field of intention, but for almost everybody, it's a rusty link. It's just it's not clean. It's just every once in a while we realize, oh my God, there is something bigger. There is something happening here. Oh wow, look at that. Oh, I met that person and that, and the right thing showed up, and I have a synchronistic. Carl Jung invented that term, synchronicity. I have like just sort of a collaboration with fate. It feels like, as if just everything just is working right, and the right people are showing up, and all of that. That stuff begins to really foment in your life, and you begin to see it taking place all over when you let go of the ego. Because the ego, according to most of the spiritual teachers, including Patanjali, is just called, it's the false self. This idea that you are what you have and what you do and what other people think of you, and that you're separate from everybody else and separate from God, that's just false. It's like, so you're living under, and that's why the Jung quote where he says that what was true in the morning will have at evening have become a lie, and you're literally living a lie, trying to fulfill a destiny that has been imposed upon you by all of these, by society and by the right people and so on. But in here, there's music that you came here to play, and you came here to play that music. Intention, the field of intention, is asking you to play that music, and to take the risks, and to do whatever it is that is required of you. And I'll be there to guide you and make it easy for you. It's not going to be a struggle. It's not going to be that difficult. You've just convinced yourself that this is going to, that's what my next book is about looking at the thought systems that we have that keep us from changing long habituated thinking patterns. Why is a person overweight almost all of their life? It isn't because they were destined to be fat. They're thinking, in a different way. And the same with addictions. Or why do you keep attracting the same kind of people into your life? The wrong people for you, or whatever it might be. This is just all long habituated thought systems that if we challenge them and begin to see that they're not even true, they're all lies. So it's like we live in a world in which all things are possible, in which there's no accidents, there can be no accidents, there's an organizing intelligence that supports everything in this universe, and we live as if who we are is this little microscopic separate thing who's always got to do things a certain way and fit in a certain way, and none of that is true. And begin to awaken to a new level, to a whole new level of experience. You'll see it this way. The first thing you'll notice is a tendency to think and act spontaneously, rather than on fears based on your past experiences. In other words, you begin to trust and surrender and to have a sense of spontaneity about your life. And you're not always focused on whether it's going to work out or not going to work out, and be afraid if it doesn't. And those thoughts you're no longer wanting those thoughts to expand in your life. And then you'll notice an unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment of your life. Every moment becomes an exquisite part of your existence. And you'll find yourself, even in times when you used to think of them as boring or routine, like, maybe getting in an airport and being delayed for a couple of hours, you begin to find an unmistakable ability to enjoy that, and to not judge it, and to see it for what it is, and to even be grateful for it, that you're not getting on a plane that wasn't supposed to leave at that time. You begin to see it that way. And you begin to enjoy the little things that we so take for granted, and the quiet times, and even driving back and forth to work, or you find yourself having this unmistakable new ability to enjoy every moment that you find in your life and to treat it all as a gift. It's a sign of the awakened life. You also find that you're developing a loss of interest in judging other people. You're off of judgment. You're moving beyond that. You understand the truth and the notion that you don't define other people with your judgments. You define yourself as someone who needs to judge. That each one of us is defined by our own thoughts and our own actions. And even those people who are behaving in ways that are antisocial and that are criminal and so on, you find yourself less judging them and more seeing them for what they are. Not saying that they shouldn't be held accountable and responsible, of course. But that judgment, that inner hostility, that inner anger toward them is replaced by a sense of wondering, how could that little baby at one time who was in its mother's arms turn out this way? What created that? And I wonder if there's anything I can do to help eliminate that in other children, rather than the judgment. You find a loss of interest in interpreting the actions of other people. You don't become this great interpreter for what everybody is and what everybody is doing. The awakened life beckons you to just sort of observe it, to note it. And even in your own behavior, you become less inclined to interpret it and more inclined to say that this is just an indication of where I am or where I am not at this particular moment. And with no need to analyze it, you begin to see how everything fits together. Rather than analyzing every little bit of life and interpreting everything for people, you try to do less of that and more of seeing how we all fit together. The awakened life means a loss of confrontation. You're no longer interested in it. It just isn't important to you. It's like having to prove yourself and make a contest out of everything. It's just no longer there for you. The real sense of the awakened life behind that is that you don't have to make anybody else wrong. And you don't have to make yourself right. That's the real sense of awakening, when you begin to know that there's much more to life than making a contest out of it. I noticed that when my little boy, who's 2 years old, goes out to play, any place, the only reason that he does it is for fun. I mean, he doesn't try to win, he doesn't try to beat anybody, he doesn't try to confront anybody. He just goes out to play. And we lose that in the name of confrontation and conflict. You begin to develop that sense that inside every one of us is a little 2-year-old who wants to come out and play and doesn't have to win and doesn't have to beat anybody and doesn't have to be in conflict or confrontation. That little child inside of you begins to surface when you start awakening. You lose the ability to worry. I didn't say you lose worry, you lose the ability to worry. It's no longer part of you. You begin to understand the absurdity of worry. You begin to see that it makes no sense to worry about the things that you have no control over. Because if you have no control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And then it makes no sense to worry about the things that you do have control over. Because if you got control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And there goes everything that you ever worried about. You either have control or you don't. And if you don't, you move on. And if you do, you take control. As you awaken, you lose that ability to just worry about things and instead accept them. You'll notice frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation, as she puts it. Frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. Appreciating everything, being thankful. It's one of the great ways to become awakened in your life, is to be thankful for everything and to give thanks for it. Appreciate getting on a plane and having it take off and having it land and having a seat and having someone to serve you a drink and being able to wear clothes and everything about your life. And as you become more aware of how much you have and how much you have to be grateful for, you become less focused on scarcity and what you don't have, because your mind is focused on what you do have. And when your mind is focused on what you do have expands. You begin to develop contented feelings of connectedness with others and with nature. You begin to see that every human being that you meet any place on the planet shares being human with you and what it feels like to be human, you begin to see that there's a oneness to it all, that there's a universal mind, that you're a part of it. And you know that each one of us is connected and that on a round planet we can't choose up sides. That you begin to know that, then you treat the people that you come into contact with the same sense of reverence that you have for yourself, because you are, in fact, that person. It's why Jesus said on the cross when the spear was thrown into him, "Forgive him, Father, for he knows not what he does." The reason he knows not what he does, he doesn't know that he's throwing a spear into himself. Because every time you hurt another human being, you hurt the generic human being. You hurt all of us. And every time you send out love, you create a sense of harmony in that being. You begin to have what she called frequent attacks of smiling. You become more joyous, more merry, more contented as you awaken and get beyond all of this need to accumulate and perform and achieve, which is all wonderful. But when you go beyond it, you begin to develop an increased susceptibility to the love extended by others, as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend it to others. Love becomes what you are, and you can't give away what you don't have, and you can only give away what you do have. And if what you have is love, then that's what you find yourself giving away. Those are the symptoms, the signs of awakening.
To change the idea that I can't trust in my own nature to I trust in my own nature. Did it ever occur to you that you have a nature? That nature is so profound and is always calling you. You know it. No one else can know it. No one else can impose it on you. No one else can tell you what it is that you feel in here that you know is why you're here and what you're doing here. There's no one else can explain that or explore that with you. You can't share it. Everything in the universe has a nature. Your dog has a nature. A crocodile has a nature. A duck has a nature. A crow has a nature. Everything has its nature. Everything has a dharma, including you. But what we've learned and we've grown up to believe is that I can't trust in that nature. My nature, to trust in your nature, to know that you came from a divine place of well-being and to trust in it. Listen to this, verse 38 of the Tao, a few lines. The great master follows his own nature and not the trappings of life. A truly good man is not aware of his goodness and is therefore good. Think about yourself. The first moment of life, the very first moment, that speck when you went from nowhere, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, to now here, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, from nowhere to now here. Same thing, just a little question of spacing, just a little different spacing, all right? So you went from nowhere, now you're in now here, and where do you think you're going? Nowhere. Right? Back to nowhere. Who out there watching, who in this audience isn't going back to nowhere? That's where we're all headed, back to nowhere. So in that split second, then you lived inside your mother's womb for 9 months. And in that 9-month period of time, you trusted your nature. You didn't have a sonogram and say, oh my God, I don't have a nose. This is very scary. What if it doesn't show up on time? Or you didn't do any of that. You trusted completely in your own nature, right? And so did your mother. There's very little that you can do because what you were to become, everything that this physical body needed, was all handled in there. And also, beyond what was needed for your physical world and what Lao Tzu called the world of the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things. There's 10 zillion things, obviously, in the physical world, but that's how he named it, the world of the 10,000 things. And in that world of the 10,000 things, everything returns back to its source. But while you're in that place, and why wouldn't you believe, even maybe for a second, that not only was my physiology all handled for me, but everything else that I needed, if I could just stop interfering with it and stop other people from doing it, that everything I needed. And that's a big part of understanding change your thoughts, change your life. It's a big part of that. The idea that I have a nature that I can trust, not something that I have to be afraid of, and I can stop letting other people interfere with it as well. So what happens? We go through those 9 months, totally uninterrupted. We have no questions. Everything works out. And then what? We say the very first thing, we pop out after 9 months, we'll take over from here. That was good work. Nice work, God. Thank you very much. And so what we'll do is just sort of edge you out of here, you know. So we edge God out. We take on an ego, E-G-O. And we edge out and we say, we'll take over. And we have an ego, and this ego, what this ego does is it takes on a set of beliefs. And these beliefs are that I am what I have, that I am what I do, that I am what other people think of me. So we're raised to believe that the more stuff I accumulate, the more things that I get, this is who I am. The more that people like me, this is what I'll get, and on it goes. I want to tell you a story. It's a story of one of my children. Her name is Tracy. When she showed up, after about the second or third year, Tracy went to preschool. And she came home from preschool. She was about 3. And in that time she came home and she said, she handed me a paper, and it had a gold star at the top of the paper. And I looked at it and I said, and she said, Daddy, I got a gold star, I said, I'm not really interested in gold stars. I said, but what are you doing? What is this? What? She said, well, we did something in school called adding, and I got them all right, and I know how to. I said, adding? I can't believe, you're 3. You can't learn to add when you're 3. And I went through this whole long thing about adding and how terrific it was, and she kept saying, Daddy, the gold star, excuse me, but I was the only one in the class that got a gold star. I got them all right. I said, you know, Tracy, I said, honey, I said, some people just need to have gold stars, and teachers sort of like to give it out and make that the reason why you're doing something. I said, and set you apart from everybody else. I said, but your dad doesn't really care much about that and how you stack up with others, and they're going to be, I'm more interested in what you're learning. And she said, okay, she was used to that. She had a weird daddy, and she knew that. So about another month or so, she came home with a paper that had looked like it had a gold star on it, but it had obviously been taken off. Her little thumbprints were all over, but there was a place that had been a gold star. It was taken off. And I said, what's this? Oh, she said, we're now doing subtraction. And I said, subtraction? That's amazing. And I took over by her dresser. I said, you know that money you've got in your piggy bank? I put it in my pocket. I said, that's called subtraction. Isn't that great? And she said, give me that money back. And we talked about subtraction. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, honey, what happened? What was this? What was here at the paper? And she said, that. She said, the teacher gave me one of those gold stars. I said, really? I said, well, what happened to it? Oh, she said, I took it off. I said, well, what'd you do with it? She said, I gave it back to her. I said, well, what did you tell her? She said, oh, I told her to give it to someone who needs that sort of thing. True story. What we have to do is learn how to take this ego of ours, this part of us that believes that who we are is what we have and what we do and what other people think of us. But remember, if you grow up believing that you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what you have, when it's gone, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what other people think of you, your reputation, which we raise people to believe, I have to be concerned with what other people think of me. Take this ego and retrain it.
And the affirmation for this is, the divine creative power within me brings to me all that I want with happiness, love, and peace. The key word here is attract. Attract to yourself that which you desire. What you desire desires you. Or what you want wants you. And it's really coming to understand that there is an energy that will bring things to you, that will have things begin to show up. And this is not to say that you just put out your manifestation desire and then just sit around and wait for some huge magnet in the sky just turn on and be facing towards you and have everything just go, there it is. There's an element of working with this divine universal force that is everywhere, and a part of this divine essence It is a divine creation. As you become more tuned into this divine consciousness, you begin to see that there's really a spiritual solution to every problem in your life. That the things that don't seem to be working, the problems that you may have, whatever they are, in relationships, in finances, in healing, and so on, that there is a solution in the physical plane that requires you to get up and do certain kinds of things and act in certain ways. But in back of that action is a thought. And the same force or the same power that moves waves to particles, which is the act of creation, also moves your pictures or your thoughts into the world of form. The same intelligence, the same energy that moves a star across the sky moves a thought across your mind. This energy, this attractiveness, this attraction, this pull towards you and realignment of your intention with divine purpose is something that we can't measure in the physical world the way we would like to be able to measure it, the way we can measure ohms and watts and so on when we're talking about electricity. Nevertheless, it is exactly the very same power, and the power that allows for anything to go from wave to particle also is behind your ability to think, and therefore your ability to picture, and your ability to decide what it is that you do desire. There is something inside of you that allows you to desire something. It isn't the desire I'm talking about. I'm talking about that which gives birth to it, that which allows it to be. The analogy here is when you begin to take care of your body in a certain way and to treat it well, to give it plenty of water, to avoid toxins, to give it the rest that it needs, to nourish it with the proper vitamins and minerals, to give it the proper amount of exercise, to do the things that show that you are respectful of this garage that is housing your soul. It becomes automatic. It isn't any longer something that you have to struggle with, that you have to work on, and that you have to think about all the time. You go to automatic. It's a lot like writing also, and creating, and painting, and music. You know, when Picasso was interviewed about his painting, and they asked him, how do you paint? He said, when I go into the studio, I leave my body and my mind at the door, the way the Muslims leave their shoes before they enter the mosque. And I just allow my spirit into that world. The spirit, this soul, this force that I have talked so much about in this whole entire program, is really a power of love that you feel in your heart. It isn't something that you process with your mind. But when you understand it and know that it is an energy that is working, that brings things into the world, into your world, realigns you, if you will, with what it is you'd like to create or have for yourself, you begin to cooperate. See, this divine intelligence will cooperate with you. But again, only if you feel that you're worthy, and only if you know that you and it are connected. The minute you sense any sense of separation, it shuts off. The minute you place an obstacle there, it will shut off.
The ability to see beauty everywhere. I remember the day that I wrote about beauty appreciation as a quality of higher consciousness, as the highest representation of emotional health that you can have. The ability to see beauty anywhere and to source your life from its presence in virtually anything. We were in Lourdes, and in the morning we went to an English mass where all of the people who spoke English showed up at 9 o'clock. And all of the people, my wife and all of the others that were there in Lourdes, were standing there
listening to the priest from Ireland give this morning Mass in English for St. Bernadette. And it was pouring, pouring, pouring rain that morning. And by that night, during the procession, it cleared up. It was so magnificent. But that morning, and it seemed fitting, since this woman materialized this healing water, that we be in the rain. I don't know, there was something that just felt right. And everybody, all of the people kept coming over to me with umbrellas, and all of them kept telling me, oh, isn't it a shame that we have to come all the way here and stand here in the rain? And I kept thinking, it's so magnificent. Just get away from me with your umbrella behavior. Enjoy the rain. And the day that I wrote about John Keats in Wisdom of the Ages, about beauty appreciation as one of the 60 qualities of self-actualization and how to apply it in your life, I read all about his life. He was called the greatest poet of the 19th century by the Britannica. The greatest poet of the 19th century, the greatest Victorian poet. And he wrote a poem called Ode on a Grecian Urn. And in that poem he says words to this effect: when death shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain amidst others' woe. This thou, this eternal thou. And he concludes that observation with these words: beauty is truth, and truth is beauty. That's all you need to know on earth, and all there is to know. Do you know that John Keats died at the age of 25? 25? Imagine what passion he must have felt in his heart. Imagine how important it must have been for him to be detached from other people's thoughts about what he should be doing with his life. And he would sit down and write over 4,000 beautiful poems. And pass away at the age of 25, and his brother passed away at 22 or 23. Independence of the good opinion of others, detachment from outcome, appreciation of beauty, living with passion. That's emotional intelligence. It's 100,000 cycles per second. And every time you find yourself in a place where someone is attempting to bring you down into fear, into worry, into anxiety, into stress, by contaminating your energy field with their story or with their attempts to make you feel guilty, or their idea of you should really be upset because I am too, or whatever it is that you are being exposed to in your life, you have the option at that moment to just say to yourself, but what you think of me is none of my business. And I have to be in a place where I can emotionally stay strong regardless of whether or not anyone out there thinks that I should be reacting in a different way. That's 100,000 cycles per second. And you know something, after a while, it isn't something that is anxiety producing. It isn't something that people will dislike you for. As a matter of fact, people around you will begin to respect you more. Because people respect strength, not weakness. Power versus force. When you become empowered, you are respected. People will want to know more of how you're able to be that way in the face of such things. And you begin to see everything in a different light. Everything. And you know, the same bewilderment can be experienced and enjoyed and processed in the city, and in your home, and in your bedroom, and sitting on your couch, and in your car, anywhere. You can look for the beauty, you can look for all of the miracles that are around it, or you can be looking for all the things that are wrong. And again, it's if you put your attention on what's wrong, then your energy goes down. If you put your attention on the problem magnifies. If you put your attention on the solution, on what is right,
and what you love and how phenomenal this moment is, that will be your experience of life. And the great masters go through life and see everything like that. As Whitman said to me, every cubic inch of space is a miracle. You don't look for miracles. You live one.